Good afternoon. I want to talk about our precious time and why changing the way we use it matters for society, for the environment, and for the economy. I've got just 18 minutes for this talk because time is scarce and we're all busy people in the fast lane of life, and the more important we are, the less time we seem to have on our hands. Time is money, as the saying goes, or money makes the world go round. But is that really true? If time is money, what about that other maxim, money can't buy happiness, or as the Beatles put it, money can't buy you love? In fact, time isn't money. Time is what we make of it. Time can bring us love and happiness, but money can't be trusted to do anything of the kind. It isn't money that makes the world go round. It's loving and caring and reflecting and learning and inventing and looking after each other and getting out and changing the world. These are the things that most deserve our time. So, here's my proposition. Let's get out of the fast lane and think about the way we use time and change it. We want to move towards a much shorter paid working week. Let's change the balance in our lives between paid time and unpaid time and give ourselves more time for living and a better chance to live well. Now, I'm not suggesting any draconian new law. I want to do this slowly and steadily over the next decade or so that we gradually change how we think and act. So let's start with the goal of 30 hours and then move towards 21 hours as the new standard paid working week, so that it becomes what people expect, what's regarded as normal, just as today we think 40 hours a week are normal, and 100 years ago it was 60 hours or more. The great economist John Maynard Keynes envisaged a 15-hour week by the 21st century, because productivity gains would make long hours unnecessary. Well, he was right about a lot of things, but not about that. But see here on this graph what did happen over the last 3 decades. Productivity rose in all 4 countries here, and working hours reduced. We've got the United States, the UK, France, and Germany. But there's a huge difference in the way the UK and the US behaved, in which they kept longer hours, while France and Germany went for shorter hours, trading productivity for time, not just money. And if you see there, where the United States and Germany started with almost exactly the same number of working hours, but then they diverged widely. And this shows the potential for change. Long hours aren't inevitable. They don't determine competitiveness in a global economy. They are a matter of choice. Now I have to make a personal confession. I'm a recovering workaholic. All my adult life I've chosen to work weekdays, weekends, evenings. I've always been busy, always consumed by my work. I am getting better now. I'm on the way. I work a 4-day week, and actually I can't imagine doing anything more. But my proposition is about all of us changing, not just me, not just a few of us, and not just because it's a nice thing to do, but because it's an urgent necessity. So let me explain why. We find ourselves beset by crisis. We have an environmental crisis with rising greenhouse gas emissions, accelerating climate change, and exhaustion of natural resources, which together threaten a catastrophic destruction of the natural world on which all our lives and futures depend. We have a social crisis with widening inequalities of income and opportunity and aspiration and power. And these inequalities fuel discontents and disorder and conflicts, and they fly in the face of our democratic values. Last but not least, the economic crisis. We have recession, stagnation, obscene levels of unemployment, and of course that little problem with the Eurozone. This toxic combination of crises is unique in our history, We have very few levers we can pull if we want to haul ourselves out of this mess. But there is one option that's hardly been explored at all. Change the way we use time. Make the transition to a shorter working week. It's not a silver bullet, but it does hold out real promise. And I want to show you how rebalancing the distribution of paid and unpaid time can help to tackle the triple crises of environment, society, and economy. So let's start with our busy, headlong lives and the impact on the environment. Of course, there are some people who have too much time on their hands because they're unemployed, and I'll come back to that. But what about the lucky ones in paid work? Why do we work such long hours? Why are we so busy that we have to rush about in cars and planes and communicate with friends on Facebook instead of face-to-face and fill our homes with labor-saving devices and stuff our kitchens with processed convenience foods? Why do we feel compelled to squeeze maximum efficiency out of every move we make? Even as parents, we have to eke out moments of so-called quality time with our children. We work long hours to earn money to buy stuff. But do you know what one of the fastest growing business sectors is, at least in the UK? You look around the edges of any city and you see more and more of these monuments to dysfunctional consumerism. We filled our cupboards, we filled our attics, we filled our outhouses, and then we get a personal storage unit. How much? How much is enough? We're buying more stuff than we can possibly use or enjoy, and the urge to buy stuff shapes how we think about how much money we need, and therefore how many hours we have to work in order to get that money. It's wasteful, but it's worse than that. All the processes involved in all the stuff we buy are robbing the earth of its natural resources, heating up the atmosphere and polluting air, land, and water. If the whole world's population worked and earned and bought stuff like we do in the rich West, we'd need not just one planet, but at least 3 to maintain our so-called standard of living. Working shorter hours would give us more time to live sustainably, to walk and cycle instead of taking the car, to take the train instead of the plane, to cook our own meals instead of buying energy-intensive food products. We can cut our carbon footprint, get off the consumer treadmill, and think again about how much is enough. Now, of course, we all need enough money to be fed and housed and cared for, and to have choices about what we do, how we live. But beyond a certain point, we know that more money doesn't make us happier. None of us will go to our graves saying we wish we'd spent more time in the office. What matters are things that money can't buy: human relationships, love and friendship, exercising our ingenuity and all those activities that involve little or no consumption, whether it's making music or climbing mountains or gardening or dancing or being good citizens or holding our governments to account. Don't let's forget that the strength and depth of our democracies depends on us having enough time to engage and participate. So now let's look at how shorter working hours can help to tackle the social crisis by reducing inequalities. The fact that so many people work long hours is part of the reason why others have little or no paid work at all. So suppose the average working week is 30 hours instead of 40. That's 10 hours that someone else can do, or if you like, an extra job for every 3 people who cut their hours. I do know it's not that simple, but there is a good chance to create more jobs for more people if we reduce the hours of people who are already in employment. And if we cut the hours of better off workers, not just the low paid, we can not only level out differences of status and pay, but also, more importantly, challenge that assumption that success depends on working long hours. And then there's the gender issue. We women tend to have lower paid, lower status jobs than men. And when we have children, it makes a kind of lopsided sense for our higher earning partners to stay in full-time employment while we take time out. There are two sorry consequences. One, women find it much harder to get better jobs later on. And two, more important, men are cut off from their families and their children, so everyone suffers, children too. A shorter working week would help mothers and fathers to share the joys and exertions of parenting on an equal footing. There'd be more women in the workforce because jobs are more family-friendly, and there would be more men living rounded, balanced lives with a sensible amount of time to share the childcare and the housework. It also makes sound economic sense. We've been driven to this current crisis by financial institutions gambling with insane levels of consumer credit, and by the extraordinary power of the idea that markets have to be as free as possible in order to achieve as much economic growth as possible, and that the pursuit of economic growth is the only goal worth having. Now we find that growth is elusive because of the nature of the crisis. But even if that were not so, a return to business as usual with unremitting growth and rampant consumerism would be a disaster for the environment. So we have to find ways of building and managing an economy that doesn't grow, that flourishes without growing, that promotes human well-being and fairness, and respects the limits of the planet. Shorter working hours will help to create that kind of economy for at least 3 reasons. 1, an economy that isn't growing usually means widespread unemployment. But if you move to a shorter working week, you can get more people into work, off benefits, and paying taxes. 2, people who work shorter hours are generally found to be more productive hour for hour, and they're less prone to job-related illness, to stress and anxiety, so that means there's less sick leave and absenteeism, which are expensive for employers. 3, if you have more women coming into employment and more men bringing in skills and experience that they've gained outside the workplace, you've got a better chance of building an effective, creative, and stable workforce, all good business and good for the economy. Most tellingly, there's no evidence that long hours are good for economic prosperity. Look at this graph. It shows countries ranked by the average yearly hours worked by people in employment. Now, if long hours were good for the economy, the next graph would follow this line. But look, there's no match. If anything, the trend in gross domestic product goes in the opposite direction. So, moving to a shorter working week can be good for the economy as well as for people and the planet. Can we do it? Well, there are obviously big challenges, and I'm going to focus on 3 of them. The first is low pay. Cutting hours means cutting income and will hit the poor hardest. I agree. It's a scandal, and it's a scandal that deserves resolution in its own right, quite regardless of what we do with working time. We need a higher minimum hourly rate. We need lower taxes for lower paid people. We need top-up benefits and credits for low-income families. We need good public services for everyone. And we need a change in all our expectations about what constitutes a decent hourly rate of pay. And the point is, we have to do this anyway. It's part of the same transition to a fair and sustainable future. The second challenge is employers' objections. We often hear that shorter hours are more expensive and harder to manage. Well, set that against some of the advantages that I've outlined, and it may be a bit exaggerated. But nevertheless, we will need to get rid of perverse incentives in tax and insurance systems so that employers are encouraged rather than penalized for taking on more workers. And we'll need a strong education and training program so that we get a good supply of skilled labor to fill those extra places. The third challenge is public attitudes. People worry that shorter hours will undermine their standard of living, but as I've tried to explain, it's our very ideas about what's a proper standard that needs to change. That's why we must think again about how much money and stuff is enough, and whether it's fair for some people to work long hours while others can't get jobs at all. And then there are people who say, but I want to work long hours. I love my work. Why shouldn't I? And to them I say, fine, go ahead. It's your choice. But why should you expect to be paid for the extra hours you put in out of your love of work if you're already getting enough and there are other people who need paid work too? And let's be sure that no one is put under pressure to work longer hours if they choose not to. 2 years ago, I set out the case for a shorter working week in this report called 21 Hours. And one reason why I know there's mileage in this idea is the deluge of emails I got from people who obviously feel passionately about it. I can only offer a tiny sample today, but here's someone who worked in retail all his life until his firm went bust. He used to work 11 and a half hours a day. He loved the job and he hated the hours. And now he says, I see a lot more of my family and friends. I bought a second-hand bike and I cook at home. More healthy meals, less fast food. He says, I need a new job to pay the bills, but I want to hold on to more of this lifestyle. And here's someone who runs a small specialist firm in the south of England. He and most of his senior staff work short hours, and yet, he says, they compete successfully with major London firms whose staff work more than 70 hours a week. And he says, I try to ensure all my staff enjoy a good quality of life, and I believe this is the key to our success. So, while some people, perhaps including some of you, are still skeptical about the idea, there are others who are living it, and it works for them. But as I said at the beginning, we have to make this shift gradually over a decade or more, so there's time to win hearts and minds and create the right conditions for change. So we can do this, for example, by trading productivity gains year on year for more time instead of money. Then young people coming into the work young people who enter the labor market for the first time can be offered, say, 4 days a week instead of 5, or 30 hours instead of 35 or 40. And there can be different schemes to suit different people, whether it's school term shifts or job sharing or sabbaticals or anything like that. So when changes are incremental, people don't feel they're having something taken away from them. Instead, they can gradually get used to living a more balanced life. My time is nearly up. My big argument has had to be squeezed very small to fit into this 18-minute time capsule, but here's the nub of it. Let's not go on hurtling down the fast lane. Let's slow down and think again about what we really value in our lives. Not living to work and working to earn and earning to consume and consuming at the peril of the planet, but sharing the work and working to live and earning enough to consume what we need for love and for happiness and for all our futures. It will be good for us, it will be good for society at large, and it will be good for the environment, and it will help us to build a strong and sustainable economy. And let's get going before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have a confession to make too. I'm a building up workaholic. I'm very young. You are just young, and so I am.
Thank you.
I'm a building up workaholic, and I hear what you say. I believe what you say, but money for me is not the issue. What do I do with ambition? I think there's lots of people here who have ideas. They want to build projects, and when you give them more time off, they just come up with new ideas and build new projects. Is there a cure for this kind of ambition?
It doesn't need a cure. That's terrific. And my organization is full of people like that who have great ideas, who always want to work long hours and do things. It depends really whether you've got kids at home.
That's right.
And how you divide up the labor at home. But leaving that aside, just to let you off the hook on that one, my point is that you can work. There's nothing to stop you working, but let's think about how we distribute paid work.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I will definitely read your book. I do have kids at home, so I'm happy I didn't read it before, or you would have another host. Now, Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank
Kurt.
you.